Check, check.
Check, check. Welcome, everyone. It is so wonderful to see you all here. And I am Joan Kimball, one of the co-chairs of the Racial Justice Advocates here at First Parish. And we've been on a racial justice journey for several years now. And I want to also welcome you on behalf of the church, as Nate did, and the Racial Justice Committee, and Barbara Slater, who is co-chair also of this committee. And Barbara did so much organizing for this meeting. And then once that it was all set, she found out that her grandson and a significant other were coming for 24 hours to visit. And it's so exciting. So Barbara had two wonderful things to do. And she chose the thing that at the end of your life you would say, did I do? So we, racial justice advocates, have three important themes this year, and immigration is one of them. The other two are democracy and human rights. And all of them affect all of us, but especially certain people like immigrants and minorities. And we chose immigration for obvious reasons because of the terrible crisis we're in right now. A crisis that has meant that the administration has resulted in having ICE. And it hurts individuals, it hurts families, and it hurts people for their whole lives. This is really, really terrible. It also means the loss of due process. And it means a threat to democracy, and it causes economic harm for all of us when we don't have people to do some of the jobs, and we're so concerned about due process. And we're so looking forward to the panel. Barbara and Sarah and I were on a meeting with this panel, and we were so excited about what they were doing, and the energy in the room was just wonderful, and they were networking with each other and sharing the things that, it's sort of in this time of really terrible time. We have the lifting of the heart when people are doing things like you all are doing. So I also wanted to introduce Sarah, who doesn't really need an introduction because she just gave the sermon. But she is our ministerial associate. She is the director of communications, and she is a wonderful leader in justice. And Sarah's been with us since 2019, and Sarah will be moderating. So I'd like you to welcome our beloved Sarah.
Thank you, Joan. And we want to get right to the panel quickly. I want to thank you again for being here. And just, we thought this was a great opportunity with this consortium to really remind ourselves that we're not alone, that we so often are in these silos, right? Within congregations and congregations separated from one another. But there's so much important work that's being done for justice. And we want to use this as an opportunity to collaborate and connect with one another and come alongside and support the work that is already being done. So we hope that through this conversation, hearing from our incredible panelists, we'll invite to introduce themselves and then to speak about what led them into this work, what in the current crisis that we are witnessing, which has part of a long, long legacy actually of injustice that immigrant communities are facing. What led them into this work? What was that instigating incident and series of incidents perhaps? What is the current crisis as they see it, and the program that they help to address that crisis, and what are the successes, what are the challenges of those of the work that they're doing, and who are their partners, and what are ways that we can come alongside and support that work. So I'm going to start with Fuerza. I invite you to introduce yourself, and also our representative from Fuerza, Frances, will be speaking a little bit more about broader context as well. So welcome.
Thank you. When I started thinking about the broader context, we can look at this from immigration, we can look at it from a broader political perspective, and then every time I sat down to think about Donald Trump, I was like, you know what? I'm kind of done thinking about Donald Trump for a minute. So I wanted to instead give you a few scenarios of the families that we are working with and what they are facing, what the consequences of this administration look like. One of those consequences is if you have a family, you have Trump supporters on one side, you have people who are undocumented on the other side. Maybe they've been able to put that aside for Christmases, holidays, whatever you want. Not this year. That's not happening this year. So you have families who are going through that kind of schism. And that's kind of an extreme example. I'm sure we all have our family dynamics. But that is absolutely one thing that is an issue. There's also, if, say you're like an elementary school teacher, and you have a student who hasn't shown up, you call home, you can't get through. The student hasn't shown up for another 2 or 3 days. You get concerned, and finally you're able to reach the mom. The mom is too afraid to leave the house to go to the bus stop. She is not able to leave to face the possibility of her family being separated because she doesn't want to have her kids taken away from her because they're American citizens and she's not. Whether or not that's something that would actually happen, we don't know because ICE is completely unpredictable these days. Let's say you also have a neighbor who works as a landscaper. He is, undocumented. He has an appointment with immigration court to try to regularize his status. He wants support. He wants somebody to be there to say, hey, I can talk to your family if you're detained, and just sometimes for moral support. And he's asking, and it might feel like you're not really qualified to do that. But it's the sort of thing where he's just looking for that help, that support, to have someone who's a neighbor with him. Let's also say that you are out getting your hair cut, and your hairdresser is sharing some of her woes as well. And her woes this week are a little bit more than normal because her husband, the primary breadwinner, was picked up by ICE. And her rent is due, and she doesn't know when she's gonna make it. And she is trying her best to make sure that she has a roof over her head for herself and her kids, and to try to make ends meet. These are the stories that we hear in Waltham every single day. This is what we deal with and what we face. And this is not counting the incredible amount of community trauma that we get from having ICE wander through and pick up all of our neighbors. So Fuerza Waltham was founded as a community defense organization by Jonathan Paz. After founding, we joined the Luce Network so that we can have access to other people across the state who are doing similar work. For us, the big turnaround for us as an organization was May 4th. We had a 5K in town that day, and a bunch of us were out either watching the 5K, some of us were going to run it, and then we had 6 ICE vehicles appear next to City Hall. So that day, if you go and look for news about things that happened that day, there was an arrest where they took somebody and left behind the 12-year-old kid who was in the car with him. So that for us was a big turning point because that also set the tone for the entire month of May. That kind of thing is stuff that we dealt with for that whole month. So for us, what we're really looking to do, our main goals are to help reduce rumor control. We want to help people understand what's actually happening. There's so much more fear if there's this blanket unknown. Who knows what's going to be going on? We also, if ICE is in town, we want to shine a spotlight on every single thing that they are doing. We want them to know that they can't just come by, swing in, grab our neighbor and leave without somebody being there to video it, to remind our neighbors of what their rights are, to remind our neighbors that their community is behind them, and to try our best. And sometimes it feels like it's hopeless, but that's why we keep going. To make sure that this administration understands that we will not go quietly. So that's the goal. So what that means for Street Team, for the people who are actually out on the ground, who are walking up to ICE vehicles and asking them, hey, are you a federal agent? Our goal is to investigate any reports of ICE. We want to, anything that comes into us, we want to go out there and we want to say, okay, is this ICE? How can we figure out if it is? And then we can help our community sort out, okay, that was ICE, that wasn't ICE. or we haven't seen ice today, maybe it's okay to go to the grocery store kind of thing. So those are a couple of the goals of our street team, just for like general work that they do. We also record interactions between ICE and the community to the extent that we can. If we see them out there, we have our phones up, we are ready to make sure that they know we are watching every single move that they are making. So us being out there does a lot of good work, but at the same time, these families still have family members being taken, they still need support, they still need help. We have a community care side of our work that does a lot. When they sent me the list of everything that they're doing, I just looked at the list and I was like, holy crap, you guys have been busy. So one of the things that we do, thanks to some help from Bijan, is court and immigration check-in accompaniment. So we have somebody go with that person to help them, just have somebody with them. You know, it makes a difference to know that you have support and that your family will be notified if anything happens. We also do case management, so volunteers can help assess a family's needs and connect them with the appropriate resources. Some of these things are things that Fuerza Waltham offers in terms of support. Some of them are not, but we're just there to help them figure out that what support they can get. We also do food support and material aid. This is everything from food and grocery delivery. Sometimes it's home-cooked meals from volunteers. Sometimes it's just locating something, like trying to figure out like items for a baby, which we don't have in a warehouse somewhere. We're going to go try to find that and help the family get access to it. We have volunteers who can guide folks through health self-assessments. So if they're too afraid to go to the doctor, you know, we're not medical professionals, but at the same time, we can help people get a little bit more of an understanding of how they're feeling and what might be a reason for them to risk going to the doctor anyway. We also have emotional support for youth enrolled in Waltham schools. I don't know how many people here know, but we have a very large number of ELL students in Waltham. And these students are very strongly affected by what's going on. Some of them have had parents, brothers, other family members taken, and our teachers are frequently saying, like, this is hard for our students, we need to support them. We also help provide legal aid connections, doing things like contacting lawyers, organizing, getting somebody in, all those things that are difficult to do when you are dealing with the emotional trauma of either being detained or having your family member detained, and all you want to do is not deal with lawyers. So we help with that too. The final thing on the list of things we actively do right now, we have an emergency financial support fund. Every single donated dollar from this fund goes to a family, because we just want that money to go directly back into our community. We do this to help cover things like, you know, basic legal and other necessary expenses to the discretion of the family. So, you know, if anyone feels like adding a couple dollars to that, that would be fantastic after this. But that's also one of the things that we're doing. And we're looking at expanding in other ways, which, sorry, I know this list is getting long. This is why I said they've been really, really busy. Mental health and emotional support for families who have been impacted by detention, not just our youth in schools. Broader transportation support if somebody doesn't have a driver's license, for example, then making sure that, you know, they're not at higher risk of driving without a license. And one of the reasons that I think I'm especially happy to be here today is that we've just started looking at expanding into housing support. And I am absolutely delighted to hear, you know, what you've been doing so that we can hopefully work together and figure out some way that Waltham can help serve our community that way.
Hi, I'm Reverend Annie Gonzalez. I'm the Minister of Faith Development at First Parish in Bedford, but I am not here with that hat on. I am here mostly in my role as a member of the core team of the Boston Immigration Justice Accompaniment Network, or BIJAN or Beyond. Either way to say it is fine. And I'm also on the steering committee for the Luce Network as a rep from Beyond. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those organizations and maybe give a little more landscape context just in terms of the state of Massachusetts and kind of what people are trying to do to reduce the harm that is happening. So some of you may be familiar. Beyond is an all-volunteer network that formed at the beginning of Trump 1. And so it was in 2017 to support people in, at the time it was started by a connection with some people who were organizing inside the Suffolk County Jail in Boston that at the time had a contract with ICE. It no longer holds for ICE, but at the time it did, and there was a lot of people, people like probably many of you who were in faith communities who were horrified by Trump's election, who wanted to do something, but were not necessarily directly connected with folks who themselves were experiencing the violence of ICE, right? And so through some connections with some organizers, we were able to sort of start connecting people in detention who really needed support and had less community support with people who wanted to offer support but weren't connected to people in detention or people going to immigration hearings. And so that's kind of still what our network primarily focuses on. Beyond, we focus on connecting people who have more resources, whether that's time and cars to drive people to appointments, or money to donate, or time to volunteer, with folks who are in immigration detention or have their loved ones currently detained or are at risk of detention when they go to something like an ICE check-in, an ISAP check-in, a district court hearing, an immigration court hearing, things like that. So we do in-person accompaniment, which means like a volunteer going with someone to an appointment. We do virtual court accompaniment to immigration hearings that are online for people who are in detention. And we also do, we have a bond fund, so we pay bonds to get people out of detention, which is one of, that's like kind of our peak goal. Our peak goal is always get people out. That has become more and more and more difficult in this Trump 2 time. It actually wasn't that difficult at the beginning of Trump 1. It was quite easy back then, the good old days. But now it's become increasingly difficult, but we still are trying. We don't give up. We still try to get people out on bond, which, if you're not familiar, it's like a ransom you pay to get people out, similar to bail in a criminal proceeding. And we also do a lot of direct support of people. We give commissary money every month to more than 300 people who are detained in New England, who are in our network, because the conditions are horrific. The food is often inedible, and people are very hungry and very desperate for a snack that is very overpriced in the jail little store. And so we give people a small $20 a month for commissary. We also offer people who are being deported $100 sent to their home country, so that when they arrive they have something and not absolutely nothing. And we also have recently begun doing some more family support to the families of the people who are detained. As you mentioned, people are usually struggling with rent. Oftentimes the person detained was one of, if not the breadwinner for the family, so people are in rough shape. We do some direct aid to families as well through our funds, which are raised from very generous people like you all and people around the Boston area who maybe are in communities where there are more resources or they have more financial resources, and we really see it as a wealth distribution system that folks who have are giving, and where all this money is going directly to people who are being impacted, or to DHS to get them out of jail, which, we don't want to pay the bonds to DHS, but it does get people out, and they do circle back to us eventually if the case is closed, so that is helpful too. So Beyond we've dabbled in other things, but we're mostly focused on people who are already in detention. However, at the beginning, in January of this year, seeing that Trump 2 was obviously very much coming, there was a convening of a lot of different immigration justice organizations that ended up forming the Luce Hotline and the Luce Network. And that's more about enforcement and building power, right? Because it's very key to do the harm reduction that Beyond is doing, like just helping people who are already in the thick of it and already experiencing these horrific circumstances. And we also want to see if we can prevent people from being in these circumstances, and we want to change the conditions, right? The conditions that are causing people to be in these circumstances. And so the Luce Network, which has hubs in a lot of different locations, has a hotline you can call if you think you see ICE, when the verifiers, which you talked about, and those are in a lot of different communities, the verifier teams, but also is trying to organize immigrant communities to build power together and figure out what is the campaign that we can focus on that would make a material difference here in Massachusetts in terms of people ending up in ICE detention. We know that the federal government is planning to crack down even harder on Boston. We know that more and more violent enforcers of the system are coming to our communities. And it's already been so horrific and so scary, the way enforcement has increased and become so much more visible and so extreme, right? And so, we're kind of bracing ourselves, but at the same time, we want to be trying to build that power that, they keep coming, but like, we're gonna also keep trying to fight and build together. So I think another really important piece of what Luce is doing, I was just canvassing last weekend in Malden, where I live in Malden, and we were canvassing an apartment building that was pretty much all immigrant families, just letting them know about Luce, inviting them to a community potluck, and just trying to get folks more connected, because there's so much fear and desperation. So that's something we're also working on. And I just wanted to say also one thing, because I can't help myself and I apologize. But I just wanted to say something because there was the mention of due process, and I hear that a lot these days. And it's very understandable. I think it's very reasonable that people are talking about that, because obviously the current regime doesn't care at all about laws or processes or really anything, right? They just do whatever the heck they want, and it's so flagrant that it's in our faces, and we really see that. And we need so much more than due process, because we had pretty much due process under Biden, and so many people were being deported. And our network every day was talking to people who were detained in the Plymouth County Jail, up in Stratford in New Hampshire, down in Wyatt in Rhode Island, who were suffering, who were ripped apart from their families, with all the due process in the world. But if the laws are unjust, if the system is racist, then it doesn't matter if you have the process. So I just want to encourage us to think bigger, dream for better. We can get better than due process. We can fight for laws that actually make sense. We can try to move money out of enforcement, out of things like policing and things like ICE, and into things like housing, which we desperately need in our communities. And so that's something you can push for, even on the town level, like on the most local levels, we can push to move those resources. And that, I think, will have a much better material impact than people following the laws that we have currently. So that's my little soapbox speech. Okay, I'm done.
Hello, everyone. I am in between you in this beautiful late summer day. I am aware. I also see some heavy eyelids, so I will try to keep your attention. You have heard a number of ideas for how you might help with the immigration justice crisis happening in our state and in our country. And I'd like to add one more possibility, and that has to do with Blue Boat Home, a housing cluster that is part of the First Parish Concord Church and beyond. But first, let me ask, does anyone remember the headlines in the newspapers about a year and a half ago that talked about families sleeping on the floor at Logan Airport? Does anyone remember the pictures of babies and children and expectant women sleeping at South Station or on the sidewalks. I saw those things and I had to do something. Now, my had to do something began when I was 10 years old and my parents wouldn't let me take a homeless person home from the sidewalk of New York City on a family visit. And if you really want to know more about that story, it's on YouTube and Barbara has the link. But I think I'll jump in a little bit more recently. So about a year and a half ago, when I saw those pictures and knew I had to do something, I decided with my husband Jeff to welcome a family. I wasn't quite exactly sure what that meant, but I worked with the Brazilian Worker Center, who's provided some really good guidance. And in the late winter of 2024, we welcomed a Haitian mom, dad, and 1-year-old. They stayed with us for a few days, and then they went, I don't know where. And that was how that was handled then. And that was really difficult for me. And the experience itself, while very satisfying in a lot of ways, was also quite solitary. And so I realized I wanted to do this work, but I wanted to do it with some others, and I wanted to be part of a community. So I reached out to the Immigration Justice Task Force at First Parish Concord, and also, because it was summer and so things were a little quiet there, I also reached out to First Parish Bedford. And before too long, someone volunteered to be a host, meaning have someone come into their home. And then someone else volunteered. And then someone called and said, I don't have the space in my home, but I want to help. And then a different church called and said, what are you doing? So all of these things came together slowly and organically, and we built what I called a short-term housing cluster, and what the group called Blue Boat Home. So, for the rest, I need my glasses. This cohort of people provides mutual support, collaboration, problem solving, brainstorming, and most importantly, a way to host families that move from one host to the next in a rotation, so that they don't just stay with one host family for a few days or a week, but go on to the next one in our Blue Boat cluster and the next. So for example, they might start with Laurie and Eric in Concord and then go on to Pam in Lincoln, and then perhaps to Jen in Lexington, and we string together as many weeks of shelter as we can and as works for the hosts. Now, the landscape of hosting has changed in the 18 months that we've been doing what we do, which is probably more like 15 months. There was a great need initially to get people off the streets, out of the airport, etc. And then January 20th happened, and things changed, and the need slowed down, and people were not coming into the country. So shelter space became more available, the need for hosts lightened, and yet still, there was need. But what I'm trying to describe here is sort of the trajectory of constant requests for housing to suddenly scarily quiet, and now again, a lot of requests for housing. So it is not something that's predictable, or that I can say to a host, oh, on this date, you will have a family of 3. I have no idea. IFC has no idea. Dave and his wife Brooks took a family of 4 on about a minute and a half notice a few days ago. So it's something that requires a lot of flexibility and a sense of humor, and the willingness to really allow yourself to be uncomfortable and inconvenienced. Not without its rewards, however. So, today, Blue Boat Home, which has all volunteers and no budget, has about 24 people, about 8 hosts, and about 8 helpers. Now, helpers are people who we couldn't operate without. They may not have the space or the mindset or the ability to host in their homes, but the helpers help the hosts host in their homes. And hosts might provide, as Ellen said, the private bedroom, the shared bath, kitchen, etc. But the helpers provide translation, trips to the grocery store, play dates with the kids, scouting around for that car seat. And they're an integral part of what we do. Let's see what else. We are all volunteer, we have no budget, and this has spread beyond Bedford, Concord. We now have members from Lexington, Acton, Maynard, Westford. We are part of Unitarian communities, we are part of other faith communities, we are part of no faith communities. All of that works. The hosts have a lot of control in determining what works for them. Some hosts want to host for a few nights, others for a couple of weeks. Some hosts want to be very involved with the families who are staying with them. Maybe it's a retired person who has a lot of time on her or his hands. Other hosts have 2 working parents, teenage kids, not a lot of time. So the amount of involvement and interaction is very much determined by the host. There's also helpers who are deciding what they can do, and they decide this based on their interests and their availability. So they say when they can help out. And they may prefer to do translation. They may prefer to be the medical person should there be a medical need. So all of that comes together and makes Blue Boat Home, I think, pretty good at what it does. We formed friendships. We step in to help each other. Our communications, this is a little bit about the nuts and bolts. We communicate via email. We have some shared Google Docs. And when we're hosting, which is getting to be pretty much all the time now, we have a 45-minute meeting every other week, quite brisk, where we hear from the current hosts, we make sure we're set for the next hosts, we talk about any policy changes in the government or in the shelter, and we problem solve with each other. So I mentioned the ebbs and flows of hosting. I looked back at a talk I had given in March, and I mentioned in that talk, we, at that point, were on our 6th family. That was March. In August, let me get this right. In August, we have hosted 4 families for a total of 40 nights who stayed from 3 nights to 30 nights with 4 different hosts. We hosted a mom and a babe, a couple and their child, another couple and their 2 children, and a couple expecting a child, who you couldn't imagine any of those being on the sidewalk. So my role is to coordinate and problem solve, call the meetings, and be a resource, and that buck stops here for the people who are part of Blue Boat Home. I like to think I add some value. I want to talk about the emotional part, because it's very hard to say goodbye to the families that we've hosted. We have broken bread with them, cooked with them, held their babies, played with their kids, sometimes been a shoulder to cry on. And then they move on to either the next host family, which is a little bit easier, or we know not where, because the state, despite its, what's the name of the bill that says no one can be unhoused? Right to shelter, thank you.
Families that contain children.
Yep, for families that contain children. We know not where they're going sometimes, and that's a really hard letting go. It's very unsettling. And more these days, in addition to uncertain futures, they are increasingly vulnerable. And yet, for a few nights or a few weeks, Blue Boat Home is able to offer shelter, safety, kindness, and love. And my belief is no matter where their journeys take them, somewhere in their memories, they will remember a time when they were cared for and treated with dignity. And as hard as it can be for us not to be able to do more, sometimes it has to be enough. Max Lucado said, "No one can do everything, but everyone can do something." People of Blue Boat Home are doing something. Perhaps you'll start your own cluster of housing. Perhaps you'll join us. You are needed and welcome. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our incredible panelists and all those folks that you represent that are doing this important work. We've heard many ways that folks are responding, people that are taking action, doing something, from immediate rapid response to bear witness to those communities that are being targeted and attacked by ICE, to providing those that are providing services and support. We want to continue this conversation with a Q&A, but first, are there any other local organizations present that would like to speak to what your groups are doing, and continue this cross-pollination of who all is in the room, what are we doing, and how can we then continue to make connections with one another to support one another in the work we're doing. So I saw one hand here, and then I'll go over here, and then over here.
Good afternoon. First, thank you to all our great panelists and to First Parish for having this informative panel on such an important and timely topic. I am Kim Gillette, as a few of you in the room know, and I am co-founder with Kathy Madison, over there, hi Kathy, of Lincoln Witness. As you may have seen us dressed up on the 4th of July parade as the Ladies' Liberty, or at the farmers market. We formed in May after hearing about arrests by ICE in nearby towns like Acton and Waltham. And so Kathy and I decided to ask, who wants to do something about this? Come to a meeting at the library to discuss what we can do. And so from that meeting of about 20 people, Lincoln Witness was formed with the primary purpose of mobilizing as a rapid response team should ICE ever come to Lincoln. If that were to happen, we plan to exercise our constitutional right to record that interaction. We plan to contact the Luce hotline, which has been mentioned, and I noticed there was a sign also up front at the window. And we would try to obtain information that would help the person being detained, and we would be witnesses. Since that initial meeting, we've focused our efforts on protecting civil rights and due process through education, advocacy, and supporting immigrant communities. Among other efforts, we've had Know Your Rights cards printed, and we've been distributing them widely at the farmers market and other places. At the farmers market, we've also had petitions that people can sign about pending bills. We've hosted a pop-up Ladies of Liberty vigil at the local Burlington ICE field office. And we've met with town leaders to try to ensure that Lincoln speaks with one voice and is prepared should ICE ever come to Lincoln. In fact, I'll be speaking to that issue at the Board of Selectmen meeting on September 8th, the evening of September 8th, and would appreciate anybody who cares about this issue to come out and show solidarity and support. Fundamentally, we believe that while the Trump administration has begun with immigrants, this should be seen as testing the waters for taking the rights away from other groups of people as well. So protecting one group of people protects us all. If you want to learn more, if you'd like to join us, please visit our website, lincolnwitness.org. And thank you.
Other organizations to speak briefly about the work you're doing.
Hi, I'm Jamie. I'm the Senior Minister at First Parish in Bedford. So I'm not sure if everyone is aware, but the Regional Detention Center for ICE is in Burlington, Massachusetts. It's in a totally nondescript office building behind a shopping mall. You would never know that it is there, but detentions flow through that building, and people are kept there illegally in squalid conditions. So about sometime in late April, a remarkable husband and wife decided that they wanted to do something about it and make the invisible visible, so they just showed up with signs that said ICE is here. And then they invited in faith leaders and anyone else who wanted to come to join them. So the second week, there might have been a dozen of us there. They've continued holding these vigils every Wednesday since then. Last Wednesday, we had 550 people there protesting that detention center. At this point, there are community activists who come to every single meeting, so it's a chance to, like this event, learn what else is going on in the community and become a part of it. network, meet people, but also just be a voice that says no, and again, to make the invisible visible. So it is every Wednesday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Regional ICE Detention Center in Burlington, which I think is 1000 District Avenue, and Annie wants to jump in.
The administrative office. It's not a detention.
Administrative office, okay. They do detain people there, though. It is,
Yes, but
yes.
it is an administrative
Administrative office.
The only place that has a contract to work for ICE is Plymouth County Jail.
Okay.
In Massachusetts.
Thank you for that clarification. It's an administrative office, although people are being illegally detained there.
Absolutely.
But anyway, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. every Wednesday. Come join us. It is growing every single week. We would love to see you there.
No, I just want to reiterate what he just said, that I've been attending those Wednesday demonstrations in front of ICE in Burlington, and I encourage you to take, whether you're there for an hour, half an hour, 2 hours, please show up. The numbers have been growing, and the amount of people that pass by in cars, that wave and beep and thank us for being there is incredible. So take an hour out of your time, show up in Burlington, right behind the mall, you can do some shopping, whatever, and join us.
Thank you. Briefly, other organizations, and then we'll get to some Q&A to our panelists who have been very wonderful.
I just wanted to add that the temples are showing up on Saturday to also demonstrate. So, our solidarity goes with all people and those that have really suffered incarceration and the Holocaust.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for being such a voice for immigrants. As an immigrant, this is really very helpful. I'm a caregiver, and I've hosted 2 families in the past 9 months, but I've not had the written document. They have stayed more than 3 months and 4 months respectively. But I have realized that some of them don't want even to go to work, and the people that we caregiver to are the people suffering. So doing this is really, really helpful. Thank you very much for doing this.
Are we ready for a Q&A?
I'd like to ask Waltham to say something. Last Sunday, when we were going to the consortium things, we went to Waltham. And I would love to have someone from Waltham say what they're doing. I was very impressed. And does anyone want to speak? Okay.
Hi, I'm Deb Jose. I'm the president of the board in Waltham. We recently started the Fuerza Emergency Interfaith Fund. So our church has adopted the community care arm of Fuerza as a project of the church. So if you're interested, I have the information on my phone, QR code that you can donate. Hi, Colleen. You can donate either by PayPal or by Venmo. From my phone, you can just donate directly. If you're writing a check, it goes to IKATUN, iKatun. I have no idea what it stands for, but that's the way that it gets in. Or you could write to First Parish in Waltham, and on the memo line, write FEIF, Fuerza Emergency Interfaith Fund. So, thank you, everybody. It's been a journey. I do a little bit with Fuerza. I have the privilege of speaking to incoming volunteers. So I'm one of the people that's vetting folks. It's such a privilege to get to talk to this really cool network of people that's doing amazing work. Colleen Bradley MacArthur, would you wave? In the back is one of our First Parish members and is also a city councilor who was the person that spotted the kid that was left on the sidewalk by ICE, a 12-year-old that was left on the sidewalk by ICE. Colleen was arguing on public. It went viral. You were interviewed by television, I know, maybe CBS. It's big. So Waltham is getting hit really hard. There were more than 50 people taken just in the month of May. We've had hundreds of people taken from Waltham. We're getting clobbered. So any help would be appreciated. And thank you to Luce and and Bijan and all of the networks for the amazing support. Because boy, oh boy, we need it. Thank you.
I would just like to give a little personal Can you hear me now? Is that okay? Closer, louder. So just a quick little personal story. I went to the ICE in Burlington this past Wednesday, and there was a man from the ACLU who told us what those conditions are really like. We heard there's little food, there's little water, people can't get their medications. There's a latrine in the center of the room with a video camera. And while we were hearing the stories of who had been there, we heard stories about people who get released, but get released with no help, no money, no cell, no anything. It was shocking. And then at the very end, we saw ICE agents on the roof who had the nerve to wave. So, yes, please come.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for sharing the work that you're doing. I wonder if we could turn to some Q&A. We have some incredible panelists. I'd love to know if there's anything that came up for you during their presentations you'd like some clarification on, questions that you'd like to ask. Thank you.
Hi there. It sounds like all of you could use money. Yes. And, you know, if I'm sitting here with a $100 bill, how do I know who gets it? How do I get it to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you know, that kind of thing. So is there a clearinghouse? Is there a way to make that easier?
Is there a handout?
It's a great question, and there are a lot of live conversations right now about how to consolidate the Luce mutual aid efforts, at least, because, you know, every different group, like Fuerza has a fiscal sponsor through you all. That's amazing. A lot of the Luce mutual aid hubs are literally just people making GoFundMes. They don't have like a fiscal sponsor. They don't have any way to collect funds. There are Luce hubs in communities where ICE is not very active, but people have more money. And there's, you know, obviously communities where ICE is extremely active and people have less money. And so we're also trying to figure out, can we form like ally hubs in communities where ICE is not very active that can intentionally be raising money for another community, like Jamaica Plain in Boston partnered up with Chelsea and Lowell recently to do a fundraiser, and they were raising for families in Chelsea and Lowell because there weren't as many families in JP that were being impacted, and there's a lot more resources there. So there are a lot of conversations about how to move money in more equitable ways, but right now we don't have like a one clearinghouse place. So if you want to give the money to people in detention or impacted by detention, all that are detained anywhere in New England, that's beyond, and we definitely can use it. We can also use a fundraising team if you're interested in that. But if you want to make sure it's going to a local community like Waltham, like give to them. You know what I mean? If you want to support the hosting efforts, you know, that's Blue Boat. And so I think you just kind of have to decide. But certainly what I can say is our website, and I should have brought handouts, you're so right, but is Beyond Bond Boston. Like the word beyond, like go beyond. Beyond Bond Boston.org is Beyond's website. You can donate there. You can get on our email list there. We have orientations every month for new volunteers. So that's a great place to get involved if you want to.
Who is your fiscal sponsor?
Our fiscal sponsor is we created our own 501c3, which is a bond fund called BBLDF, the Beyond Bond and Legal Defense Fund. So yeah, it's all through that 501c3.
I just want to take this moment to say that as well that it's not, we all do need money. We'll just be honest about that. It would be very nice to have more for our emergency fund and everything. But also skill sets, volunteers who have particular skill sets and can work online are still extremely valuable to us too. You don't always have to be physically present in order to make a difference with your time. So anything like, if you work in IT, if you work in legal, if you work in accounting, finance, a lot of the times these skill sets can be really, really handy for us. So I would consider that too.
I am probably one of the few people who will say we don't want your money. And someone may shoot me for saying that, but we're all volunteers. We have no budget. Sometimes expenses come up, and the members of Blue Boat Home are very gracious and generous. But we would welcome your support, either someone considering hosting or who would like to be a helper with us.
I just wonder, I've forgotten your name, forgive me, whether supporting Luce just as a central group, so because they have a hotline that is utilized by all these adjuncts, is that correct? Or no?
Yeah, I can, because I'm on the Luce steering committee, I can talk a little about Luce. Yeah, Luce got a huge amount of donations and some grant funding, which isn't to say we don't need more money, but I think Luce is also still really trying to figure out, it's a coalition of groups that haven't worked together, and it's awesome, and it's really hard. It's like, you know, we've got Spanish-speaking groups, and groups that primarily work with Asian Americans, and groups that work with Muslims. And it's, you know, there's language challenges to us all being together, and there's groups that aren't even represented who we want to get in the room. So it's a bit of a slow process figuring out how does a coalition of all these different groups make decisions together about money. And so they definitely have spent it on staffing the hotline. That has already happened. The hotline is up and running. And Luce, as a network, is trying to figure out how else to spend our money in ways that are, you know, make sense and work for all the people involved. So giving directly to Luce itself, that wouldn't be my pitch at this moment. But I would say giving to mutual aid hubs of Luce, like Forza, Waltham, there's lots of other ones in different locations, or beyond, we do a lot of just direct aid. The money just goes to directly to people who need it.
Other questions?
I'm Richard Warren. I participate with Rotary Club of Concord. On the Sunday before the first Monday of every month, we cook at Open Table. It's a soup kitchen, not soup kitchen, but food distribution kitchen in Maynard. And today we prepared meals that we, for about 60, that we then deliver tomorrow to the Bristol Lodge Soup Kitchen, which is now hosted at the Episcopal Church on Main Street in Waltham. And we have more capacity. I'm wondering if there's a need for bulk meals preparation, if there's a place to receive that, and if there's some interest in that. Be happy to increase our production.
Yeah, I'd be happy to get our community care team involved. We have a group we call the Foodies who handle the food side of things. And I know we do sometimes home-cooked meals and that sort of thing. So I can, if you want to find me afterward, I'm Frances. You can absolutely let me know, and I'll see if I can get you connected with our community care team.
Hello, I'm I'm Jane Von Maltzon. We're from St. Anne's, a group here. Thank you for opening this up to other churches in the area as we get beyond our buildings and our brands and work together to solve problems together. I guess the really naive and scary question behind all this for me, the elephant in the room, is we're working like ambulance drivers on a battlefield, caring for the wounded, and we're not solving the attack. And the realization is sinking in that even our governor and our legislature aren't really in the position of getting rid of ICE on our territory, right? I mean, we're stuck with this problem for the time being, but the root of the problem is that, and I don't know myself how we actually attack that. Thank you.
We have any responses? And then another question.
Yeah, so exactly right. That's so true. And it is true that there is not much we can do to stop. I mean, ICE is a federal agency, so like with what army are we stopping them, right? Like, we're not. And there are things we can do, even here in Massachusetts, that our governor and legislature could do. Will they? Probably not, but maybe we should make them do it, right? There are things that can be done to reduce some of the harm. We can't stop it right now. And there are ways to build power so that in the future we can contend for power better. And so, like I said, Luce, the network is trying to build power, right? We're trying to use this moment and not only help what people who are being harmed, but also say, and come on, and we're gonna go, and we're gonna, but we are trying to figure out what is our demand and who are we targeting, right? But I will say a couple things that would materially really make a difference. One is local police departments do collaborate with ICE, and there are these regional intelligence centers, maybe you know about them, called fusion centers, that are places for ICE police collaboration. The one in Boston kind of famously has this gang database that luckily some of it has been, because of awesome community organizing, gotten rid of, but people would end up on that list for all kinds of things. Like they wore a shirt that was a color to school, and then they get put on this list. We know someone who was deported because he was put on the gang database list because of a shirt he wore. He was not part of a gang. So decreasing surveillance in any community is going to help. So that means knowing what your local police department is up to. What are they spending money on? Are they investing in surveillance tools like license plate readers? And there's a lot of scary stuff, but so surveillance is a big one. And you can organize against surveillance stuff at the very local level. And then another thing is pushing for all hearings to be virtual for court, because a place that ICE is getting a lot of people is in courthouses. Somebody, you know, they get they get a DUI, they get a speeding ticket that's, you know, whatever, they have to go to court for some reason, whatever, this or that happens, there's a dispute with a neighbor, they want to go to court to resolve it, but ICE is going to get them there. And so then they don't want to go to court and resolve it, and that leads to other problems. If people could attend these hearings virtually and ICE could not grab them at court, that could help a lot. And we are not 100% clear on who has the jurisdiction. We've been doing research. But if you want to find out who has the jurisdiction to make hearings virtual in Massachusetts, we thought it was Healy. She said it's not her. I don't know. Maybe it is her and she just doesn't want to deal with it. Who knows? But that's something that could concretely help. So focusing on places where police are collaborating with ICE and focusing on things like virtual hearings would decrease ICE's impact on people in Massachusetts now, and then building power to contend in the future.
Hi, I'm Laurie Van Loon from First Parish Concord, part of the Immigration Justice Task Force with Regina. I just wanted to mention a little piece of the puzzle that hasn't been mentioned yet, which relates to history. There used to be something called asylum law. There used to be something called the right to asylum. People could come and apply for that based on persecution on a number of very specific grounds. And if they were fortunate and had a decent lawyer, they might in fact get granted permanent residency eventually. Sometimes that would take years and years to happen, but it did happen some of the time. So the system was pretty crippled, but it wasn't completely broken. And nowadays, with people getting arrested, when they show up for their immigration court hearings and getting deported, we can see that the asylum system is probably completely broken at this point, which is, nevertheless, there are still people waiting for their hearings. I do mental health evaluations for people seeking asylum, and there are still people waiting for their hearings coming up, and we'll see. Maybe there's just a tiny trickle that is still able to actually get asylum for horrendous circumstances which they have been fleeing in their home countries.
Any reflections on that from the panel?
I'm wondering about contact information. So I'm just not finding Forza online in terms of Forza and then Blue Boat. How do we get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I'm one of the leads for the Forza Street team. For a lot of security reasons, we don't want to have too much of a profile online right now, but in terms of if you want to get in touch with us to donate, as we said, First Parish Waltham has been hosting, is our fiscal sponsor. If you want to get in touch to do street team work, you can connect with me after. As Francis said, we have many different kind of working groups. So if you're interested in community care, we can get you in touch with that. So depending on what your skill set is and what you want to do, we prioritize, as like Deb Jose is one of our vetters, we make individual connections with people, we talk through with their analysis of things. So there is sort of like a vetting process to be part of it for a lot of important reasons. But if you do want to be part of Fuerza, definitely talk to me or Francis or Deb at the end of this meeting and we can get you connected.
Thank you. Others on how to get in touch? Well, we want to, offer some time for people to make connections. Go for it.
Sorry, I knew I had one more thing in my brain and it flew out of my brain. In terms of things that would be helpful, another thing is like bills in the legislature. So there's a bill, Dignity Not Deportations, that would end ICE contracts in Massachusetts and also prohibit future ICE contracts in Massachusetts, which I think is very important because they are expanding detention like crazy in New Hampshire and Maine, like right now. And so anyway, we only have one jail that holds for ICE in Massachusetts now, but we used to have 5, I think, when Beyond started, and it would be great if we could stop that. So that's a bill that has been filed, and Beyond at least sends out updates on our email list of how you can support that bill. And other bills too, like a rent control bill that doesn't seem as directly related, but housing is a huge issue for immigrant communities, and especially those who are being impacted by ICE enforcement. Having a safe place to live where you can be and be in private space is really important. And so, anything that can help people afford housing. So I know people are organizing on a rent control bill, and that is also a local state initiative. So those are 2 bills.
I just want to mention, there are some handouts that have some information, including the contact information for Bijan. I think Forza is also on there. And it's on a small round table in the common room.
I'm updating a Q&A on Blue Boat Home that I'll be sending to Barbara to distribute to anyone who would like it. If you don't catch me after this panel, please look for that.
I just want to build on the what we can do. We have seen a very strong trend of the jail to deportation pipeline. So if we have something from the Middlesex County Sheriff where they're deciding, okay, we're going to crack down on drugs this week. It's like, okay, how many of these people are being racially profiled and then ending up having to go to court and then being deported from there when they haven't actually done anything? So that's something to look at where that goes down to community policing again, but it also goes to elected officials such as the Middlesex County Sheriff or the Suffolk County Sheriff. where we do have more of a voice and ability to say, no, we don't want this to happen. So that could also be another official to reach out to.
Well, thank you all for being here. Joan, you have a...
Hi, thank you all for being here too. I had a couple of things. The witness people in Lincoln have recommended that people put the Luce number on their phones. So if you see something, you can call immediately, and then they take the information, and then they'll have verifiers. And I think that's something that we all can do that's very small. And witnesses also made these little cards, and they're really fantastic. And they have the information in English of the rights of people and the information in Spanish, and some of the other cards have it in Portuguese. And I know that we've been going up to people that we know. I have a wonderful person who works for me, and I've said, would any of your friends like these cards? And my friend, who is a documented citizen, said, yes, I have friends who don't speak English. And I gave her a whole lot of these cards, and she said, I'm going to tell them to put them in the window so that when ICE comes, they know their rights, because they don't speak English. So there's English on one side, and they can see it. So I think that kind of thing is really good. And there's so many people that work in Lincoln and live in Lincoln who might benefit from these cards. And I'd never ask what their status is, but I would say, do you have friends who might use this? And I think that's really important. And I was also in Waltham very interested to hear that people are going from Fueza to the court and standing in witnesses as people are going in court, because there's so many people going in court in Waltham, and just to be a witness is really very, very moving. So I just want to thank everybody for being here, and thank you all. The first time I heard you, I was so inspired, and I'm even more inspired now. So thank you.
Thank you all for being here, for sticking around here on this beautiful, long weekend. We hope that you'll also still stick around and make some connections with the panelists as well as each other, so you can get involved, find ways to plug in. Yes. Yes. Can we pass the mic down the line one more time and state your name and your organization?
I'm Frances with Fuerza Waltham.
Regina Correo, First Parish, Concord, and Blue Boat Home.
Annie Gonzalez with Beyond and Luce.
Ellen Shiner from First Parish in Bedford, the Immigration Justice Committee.
Thank you all for being here with us and for sharing your work. This is just the beginning. Let's continue the work and do it together.